Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Zhang. Here is a preview of some of today's top stories. The Supreme Court grants Texas the ability to arrest people suspected of being illegal immigrants. More on what this means for the Lone Star State. Peter Navarro begins his prison sentence. He's the first former White House official to be imprisoned for a contempt of Congress conviction. Idaho lawmakers vote on a bill to ban public funds for gender-affirming care. Find out what people are saying about the proposal. First up, significant win for Texas. The Supreme Court today granted Texas the ability to enforce a law that would allow local law enforcement officials to arrest people suspected of being illegal immigrants. Here's more. The High Court's decision rejected the Biden administration's emergency request to halt the enforcement of a Texas law. The Department of Justice argued that states cannot enforce immigration laws and that it violated the Constitution's supremacy clause. But Texas has said it put the law in place to compensate for the Biden administration's inadequate response to the surge of illegal crossings at the southern border. The Supreme Court's order provided no reasons, but Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh filed concurrent opinions, while the three liberal justices dissented. With today's ruling, the immigration law can now go into effect while lower courts consider the law, known as SB 4. It was passed by the Republican-controlled state legislature last year and signed into law by Texas Governor Greg Abbott in late December. Specifically, SB 4 allows local and state police to arrest people who have illegally crossed the U.S.-Mexico border and imposes criminal penalties. State judges are also given the power to order illegal immigrants to be deported under the measure. Now let's take a look at other top headlines. 5 states are holding presidential primaries today, a week after both President Biden and former President Trump won enough delegates to clinch their party's nomination. Biden is contending with the protest movement from Democratic voters who oppose his backing of Israel's war against Hamas terrorists. In Arizona, organizers who support the uncommitted movement are urging voters to choose Democrat Marianne Williamson over Biden. Williamson suspended her campaign after Nevada's primary but recently reactivated. Arizona's large Hispanic population could help Trump as a growing number of Hispanic voters are switching their allegiance to him. There will be no Democratic primary in Florida. The state's party effectively canceled it after voting to list Biden as the only candidate on the ballot. Trump also faces no challengers in the Sunshine State. The former president defeated Biden in Florida in 2020 and has an even wider lead in polls this year. In Illinois, organizers of the uncommitted movement are asking Democratic voters to either leave their ballots blank or write Gaza on them. Biden beat Trump in Illinois in 2020 and is expected to win the Democratic stronghold again this year. Kansas is holding its first presidential primary in 30 years. It normally holds caucuses. In November, Trump is expected to win the state easily. Ohio does not have an uncommitted option, and blank ballots and write-ins would not be counted. A March poll by Survey USA has Trump leading Biden by 17 points there. NTD's Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer took a deep dive into the election's most pressing issues as voters cast their ballots across the country for their nominee. For a recap of all the action and the results, visit ntd.com. Former President Trump is suing ABC News as well as host George Stephanopoulos. Trump is accusing them of defamation after Stephanopoulos repeatedly claimed that a jury had found Trump liable for the rape of writer E. Jean Carroll. Here's Stephanopoulos, who made the statement when interviewing Representative Nancy Mace.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald Trump.
No, you are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury.
The official complaint states that Stephanopoulos made the statements several times, quote, with actual malice or with a reckless disregard for the truth. Trump's lawyers say that Stephanopoulos knew that the jury did not find a former president liable for rape, yet still falsely stated otherwise. The jury in the case actually ruled that Carroll failed to prove her rape allegation. They found that Trump was liable for sexual abuse and defamation. This verdict is currently being appealed. Peter Navarro, an ex-White House aide to former President Donald Trump, reported to a federal prison in Miami today. He is the first former White House official to be imprisoned for a contempt of Congress conviction. Navarro was sentenced to 4 months in prison for not complying with a subpoena from the House Select Committee that investigates the January 6 Capitol breach. While the 75-year-old aide to the former president maintained that he invoked his executive privilege of testimonial immunity.
For hundreds of years, this has not been a crime, and for 50 years, the Department of Justice has maintained the principle of absolute testimonial immunity. And it was only with my case that somehow that has changed.
Navarro then bested the Democrats as the ones who were prosecuting him called the sentence the partisan weaponization of our judiciary system.
They can put me in prison. They can put you in prison. Make no mistake about that. And make no mistake about this. They are coming after Donald Trump with the same tactics, tools, and strategies they used to put me over there today.
Navarro was the second prominent Trump advisor to be convicted of contempt of Congress. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon was also sentenced to 4 months in prison in 2022, but his sentence has been put on hold while he appeals. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin today talking about Russia's war plans. This comes just days after Russian President Vladimir Putin won re-election. Austin went on to say that the war has cost Russia $211 billion and killed or wounded at least 315 Russian troops. Over 50 defense leaders from Europe and around the world are meeting at the U.S. military base in Germany today. Austin used the occasion to once again advocate for more Ukraine aid. The meeting comes a week after U.S. defense officials said they found $300 million in contract savings. They will use that to fund more military aid for Ukraine, pulling weapons from Pentagon stocks. Idaho lawmakers voted to advance a bill barring gender-affirming care for transgender and non-binary individuals on Medicaid and state insurance. NTD's Christina Corona has more on the bill.
The Senate State Affairs Committee advanced the bill in a 4-3 vote Thursday morning. HB 668 aims to prohibit the use of public funds for gender-affirming care, extending to state employees' health insurance and Medicaid coverage for adults. The public funds shall not be used to pay for any surgical operation or medical intervention
for the purposes of altering the appearance of an individual in order to affirm the individual's perception of the individual's sex in a way that is inconsistent with the individual's biological sex, regardless of whether the surgical operation or medical intervention is administered to a minor or an adult.
Bill sponsors said the bill aims to protect taxpayer dollars and would save the state millions of dollars, as Idaho's Medicaid spending on gender-affirming procedures sparked costly litigation. In one instance, the state was compelled to offer gender transition surgery to a transgender inmate, resulting in approximately $2.5 million in legal fees awarded to them.
People who get on these hormone blockers are on them for life. They become lifelong patients.
However, one individual opposed the bill, saying the medical help saved them.
7 years ago, here in North End, you might have found me as a suicide statistic, and I was homeless and jobless, and this care has saved my life. And I wake up every morning just incredibly happy.
Others argued the bill is discriminatory and violates the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause because it targets transgender Idahoans.
What this bill is doing is it isn't blocking specific medications, it's blocking specific identities of people from accessing medication that everyone else gets access to.
We are human beings, we're your neighbors, we're your constituents. We are valuable members of this community. We are taxpayers. We deserve access, medically necessary access to benefits as any other Idahoan would.
If passed, the law would make Idaho the 10th state to restrict Medicaid funding for gender-affirming care across all age groups. At least 23 states have passed laws banning gender-affirming care for minors. The legislation passed the House in a 58-11 vote and only needs to clear the majority Republican Senate before it is sent to Governor Brad Little's desk. Christina Corona, NTD News.
NBA Hall of Famer John Stockton, along with RFK Jr. and multiple medical professionals, are suing government officials in Washington state. The lawsuit alleges that government agencies have violated the First Amendment rights of physicians to publicly speak their opinions during the COVID outbreak. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
The lawsuit targets policy in Washington state that punishes doctors who spoke in opposition to the CDC's COVID recommendations. The lead attorney in the lawsuit, Richard Jaffe, said in a statement that 60 doctors have been or are currently being prosecuted in Washington in relation to speaking publicly against the mainstream COVID narrative. Jaffe said, quote, "In a novel health crisis, society should want a vigorous public debate when highly personal infringing rules are in place." Stockton told News Nation that in Washington they are still advertising the COVID vaccines as safe and effective, saying, quote, "The Pfizer reports, their very own reports, announced 1,200 deaths and 42,000 injuries in 3 months. And yet our health district, our state, the state of Washington is still saying no, they're safe and effective. Please get your booster." Stockton has been in the public eye before for standing against certain restrictions during the pandemic. In 2022, Stockton was banned from Gonzaga University's McCarthy Athletic Center, where he went to college, for refusing to wear a mask while watching games. In a related case, the U.S. Supreme Court is currently hearing Murphy versus Missouri, a case involving how government agencies can interact with social media platforms and if they can influence content moderation policies. The case highlights how certain agencies were pressuring platforms during the pandemic to censor what the agencies consider to be harmful speech or information. The Washington state lawsuit involving Stockton was filed March 7th and, according to Jaffe, is expected to be in court by May. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Well, take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come back. An Afghan refugee has been found guilty of murder in New Mexico. More on his trial. A respected astronaut has passed away. He commanded the Apollo 10 moon landing. Stephen Curry for president? Find out his thoughts on running for political office. Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Zhang. An Afghan refugee has been found guilty of murder during a shooting in New Mexico 2 years ago. He will continue to stand trial.
We find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder by deliberate killing and discharging count 1.
An Afghan refugee has been found guilty of first-degree murder in one of 3 fatal shootings that shook Albuquerque's Muslim community during the summer of 2022. Jurors returned the verdict Monday. Mohammed Syed faces life in prison for killing 41-year-old Aftab Hussein in July 2022. He also will stand trial in the coming months for the other 2 slayings that August. At trial, prosecutors presented cell phone data that showed his phone was in the area when the shooting occurred, and a ballistics expert testified that casings and projectiles recovered from the scene had been fired from a rifle that was found under Syed's bed. Defense attorneys said prosecutors couldn't prove Syed pulled the trigger.
A respected astronaut has passed away. He was known for commanding Apollo 10, the rehearsal flight for the famous moon landing.
Astronaut Thomas P. Stafford, who commanded a dress rehearsal flight for the 1969 moon landing and the first U.S.-Soviet space link-up, died Monday. He was 93. Stafford, a retired Air Force 3-star general, took part in 4 space missions. According to the director of the Stafford Air and Space Museum in Weatherford, Oklahoma, Stafford died in a hospital near his Space Coast, Florida home. Stafford was one of 24 NASA astronauts who flew to the moon, but he did not land on it. Only 7 of them are still alive.
I think they should know how hard we worked. You know, everybody. There's 400,000 people working on Project Apollo. And believe me, a 40-hour work week was a vacation in those days. Like I said, we flew 10 missions in 20 months on Gemini. And then once we started Apollo, we flew in 9 months, 5 missions, and 4 of them on the big Saturn. That was tough, but we did it.
After he put away his flight suit, Stafford was the go-to guy for NASA when it sought independent advice on everything from human Mars missions to safety issues to returning to flight after the 2003 Space Shuttle Columbia accident. He chaired an oversight group that looked into how to fix the then-flawed Hubble Space Telescope, earning a NASA Public Service Award. The Apollo 10 mission in May 1969 set the stage for Apollo 11's historic mission 2 months later. After the moon landings ended, he went on many more missions. In all, Stafford spent 507 hours in space and flew 4 different types of spacecraft and 127 types of aircraft and helicopters. Stafford returned to the Air Force and worked in research and commanded the Air Force Flight Test Center before retiring in 1979 as a 3-star general. Stafford's Air Force duties not only had him run the military's top flight school and experimental plane testing base, but he was commanding general of Area 51. Stafford became an executive for an Oklahoma-based transportation company and later moved to Florida near Cape Canaveral. He is survived by his wife Linda, 2 sons, 2 daughters, and 2 stepchildren.
Wayne Simmonds from the NHL has announced his retirement, and the 49ers have made some moves on Monday. Tyler Castillo with more details.
Wayne Simmonds has officially announced his retirement after 15 seasons in the NHL. He signed a 1-day contract with the Philadelphia Flyers to retire as a Flyer after spending 8 of his 15 seasons with Philly. Wayne Simmonds, however, didn't start his career with Philadelphia, as he only landed there after being traded to the Flyers from the LA Kings, the team that originally drafted him. Although the Kings were the team that put his foot into the league, he is most well known for his time with Philadelphia. Simmonds represented the Flyers in the 2017 NHL All-Star, where he was also named MVP. He was also a finalist and won the Mark Messier NHL Leadership Award in 2019 while on the Flyers. His leadership off the ice also translates to on the ice. During his time for the Flyers, he climbed to second in all-time hits as Wayne Simmonds was able to do it all in scoring and being physical. Wayne Simmonds' career was spent with the LA Kings, Philadelphia Flyers, Nashville Predators, New Jersey Devils, Buffalo Sabres, and lastly with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He ended his career with 526 points in 1,037 games played. He also represented Team Canada in the 2008 World Junior Championships and won gold, and then in 2013 and 2017 the World Championships where he won silver. The San Francisco 49ers last season made it to the Super Bowl, but fell short as they attempted to go all in for the potential ring. However, with salary cap restrictions, they had to let go of some big names. The 49ers let go of Chase Young, who was acquired through the trade deadline by the Washington Commanders. His time spent with the Red and Gold was seen as underwhelming as he did not live up to the on-paper threat of Chase Young and Nick Bosa duo. Young ended up signing a 1-year deal with the New Orleans Saints, where it was also reported that he will be sidelined until training camp due to an undergoing neck procedure. The 49ers also seem to have found their new backup quarterback. Joshua Dobbs signed a 1-year deal with the 49ers after being moved around last season. The Niners let go of Sam Darnold, who was backing up Purdy last season. Dobbs last season started the year with the Cleveland Browns, but was traded to the Arizona Cardinals right when the season started, where he went 1-7, and then was traded to the Minnesota Vikings, where he went 2-2. In the debut for the Vikings, Dobbs gained nationwide attention for his sensational debut. He threw for 220 yards, a passing and a rushing touchdown in his debut for the Vikings. The 49ers have seemed to have found a fitting backup role.
Steph Curry for president? In a recent interview, the basketball star said he would consider it.
In an interview with Jericka Duncan on CBS Mornings, Warriors star Stephen Curry said he plans on going into politics after his basketball career. He said he would, quote, maybe run for president.
If politics is a way that you can create meaningful change, or if there's another way outside of politics.
Curry was on the show to promote his book called I Am Extraordinary to help kids find confidence. The question about his presidency came up when the station showed a photo of him at the White House after the Warriors' most recent NBA championship. Curry said he wants to leverage every part of his influence for good. When Duncan suggested 2028, he replied, not that soon. Last year, the 36-year-old said he does not plan to retire anytime soon.
Stay tuned for China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer coming up next. First in America, Indiana is cracking down on sister city relations with adversaries like China, passing a law last week to ban its own cities from taking part. And that's all we've got for you tonight. We would like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.